Captain Harv. What's the difference between known ice and known icing conditions? Flying is like enjoying a fine scotch. Or this stuff. It should be savored without little distractions like ice. Ice dilutes the full flavor of a fine Highland single malt and can ruin your day on the wing of your bonanza. As a pilot, you already understand that ice formation on the wings of your magic carpet is cause for concern and quick action, especially if you don't have anti-icing equipment. But there are things you read and discussions you hear that might cause some confusion. Known ice, known icing conditions. What's the difference? Don't you worry your pretty little head. Let Captain Harv explain. This is known ice. I can see or otherwise detect it. That's good ice. And if I drop it in my glass, I know that, just as with ice on a wing, things are gonna go badly if I don't get rid of it. And fast. Known ice, which is ice that's already there, is not to be confused with known icing conditions. These are two very different things, especially the FAA. In their official, unambiguous, and legally binding language, the FAA defines known icing conditions this way. That's right, aviators. At no point in federal aviation regulations or in the Aeronautical Information Manual does the FAA define known icing conditions. But you better know what it means anyway, because the FAA has taken enforcement actions against pilots for recklessly flying into known icing conditions. And they use that term in court.
Dad, look, isn't this great?
What? Oh, yeah, that's neat, but Daddy needs to get back to work.
Mom said you were just playing dress up again.
Where were we? Ah, yes. Avoiding the FAA by avoiding known icing conditions. While the FAA doesn't specifically define known icing conditions, they do rely on 3 regulations in Part 91 to which you should pay particular attention. FAR 91.9A states that no person may operate a civil aircraft without complying with the operating limitations specified in the approved airplane or rotorcraft flight manual. And the term known icing conditions does appear in most AFMs and POHs. FAR 91.13A states that no person may operate an aircraft in a careless or reckless manner so as to endanger the life or property of another. And FAR 91.103 specifies that each pilot in command shall, before beginning a flight...
Hey, Commodore Harv! Didn't I specify that you need to take out the trash?
And FAR 91.103 specifies that each pilot in command shall, before beginning a flight, become familiar with all available information concerning that flight, and that this information must include weather reports and forecasts for flights under instrument rules or that leave the vicinity of the airport. As with so many federal aviation regulations, the FAA has put themselves in the position of determining if you're in violation on a case-by-case basis. There is some good news, though. The FAA's Office of the Chief Counsel has given us a hint as to how the FAA will decide if you recklessly performed your flight on the rocks when you should have known better. The FAA looks at fact-specific assessment tools that are available to pilots in determining whether or not known icing conditions exist. Surface observations, temperatures aloft, terminal and area forecasts, airmets and sigmets and pyreps, oh my, and anything else a pilot can get their hands on when briefing themselves on the weather. But here's the key. The FAA wants to know if all that information would lead a reasonable and prudent pilot to conclude that taking to the air would lead to the formation of ice on an aircraft. Oh, but it gets even better. Even though meteorological information available at the time of the flight may not have shown evidence of known icing conditions, the FAA can still give you a slap on the empennage if they decide you were careless because a reasonable and prudent pilot would not have operated in those conditions. Relying on the massive amount of information in my superior memory, I could go on for hours. But let's just say the bottom line is that you should always err on the side of caution when considering flying where there's even a small chance ice could form on your aircraft. Your flights and your scotch should always be the same. Neat. This is Captain Harv reminding you, I never set my altimeter because I'm never affected by pressure. The FAA can still give you a slap on the empennage if they decide that you were careless because a reasonable and prudent pilot would not have operated in those conditions. Who is this reasonable and prudent pilot the FAA keeps referring to?
Oh, I'm sure it's you, Cruise Director Harv.